In Homestead, Florida, stands one of this generation's megalithic structures, built by a single man named Ed Leedskalnin. First in Florida City, he relocated the entire castle to Homestead, Florida, where he completed the work. Frequently compared to the pyramids at Giza, the heads of Easter Island, and Stonehenge, we look at Coral Castle. One giant question remains. How did he build this? The only first-hand accounts that we have of other people watching Ed work is only at night, where he has been said to sing to the stones that now make up what he called Rock Gate. Many of these single pieces of rock weigh over 1,000 tons, and the question remains, how did he do this? We explore this question among many other questions about the nature of our reality, hidden technology, mathematics, and the world energy grid. Come along with me on this journey as we look into just how Ed Leedskalnin created Coral Castle. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Yissel Missile Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and today we are continuing our deep dive series into Coral Castle. We'll be reading again from The Energy Grid by Bruce L. Cathie. Today's chapter is chapter 25. The Organization of a Miracle. We're on page 223. It'll be about 10 pages today. Over the past several weeks, I've been looking for video of this author. There's a documentary out there that is nowhere to be found on the internet. Kind of concerns me. I found a copy of exactly what I was looking for, though, on one channel on Rumble. And it barely had 3 digits for views. I don't understand it. But I found it. That's what's important. And on YouTube, there was some Indian channel that had a bunch of videos relating to this topic, including some Cathie videos. So I've been collecting those, trying to have a good, archive of Bruce Cathie, because I don't see anything comprehensive online right now, at least on the video platforms. So we'll have this series to use for reference. So I always take notes for every part that we do here. That's another thing I've been doing, is putting my notes together and reorganizing those. There's only like so many books, names that you could write down on different pieces of paper before you have to start cataloging them, putting them together. And then eventually the work of researching that stuff further, that takes up time. But like I've said before, I enjoy doing this. And we'll continue looking into how Ed Leedskalnin built his coral castle, because I still don't have a clear answer here. But the good thing about the next few parts that I do here, next week, this book talks about Ed Leedskalnin. So chapter 26, that'll be talking about Coral Castle. And that's next week. So it took us over 200 pages to get here. But it's in the book, so we have to read. And this was recommended from the first book that we started the series off with. One of two major books. And I have the other book. We'll start that after we're done with this one. Really, I'd say 4 more parts, and then we'll be moving on to the next book. Alright. Anyways, let's begin, shall we? Chapter 25. Real quick, though. Do need to get the slideshow going. Alright. Chapter 25. The Organization of a Miracle. When modern civilization, for want of a better phrase, first impinged upon the brooding jungles of New Guinea, it inadvertently created new religions. Primitive tribesmen encountered their first representatives of the outside world, in many cases by courtesy of the airplane. Many missionaries arrived in the bushland outbacks by aircraft. To the native mind, these were superior beings who descended in vehicles from the clouds, stepped out, and distributed gifts and medicines. These strange white beings, with their superior powers, their odd clothes, their material benefits, were as gods. Thus were born the beliefs that have come to be known as, quote, cargo cults, end quote. In the wake of the first airborne missionaries, deluded New Guineans in scattered parts of the territory hacked out rough airstrips in the jungle, hung up tattered rags to represent windsocks, and chanted religious incantations, hoping to entice the gods to come on another visit. No doubt rival tribes adopted differing religious beliefs. One tribe might insist that God was 6 feet tall, had red hair, and a flowing beard. To their rivals across the river, God was a short, plump being in khaki slacks with glasses. None would willingly accept that God was an intangible, a force that has characteristics that are manifested in identical in identical manner to all life throughout the universe. The creative force that permeates all space, all material things, that all things are cells in the gigantic God body. Christ said, quote, "Ye are gods." We are all manifestations of the Creator, and in our turn, to a limited extent, we too can create. When we fully understand the creative force and learn how to apply it, we shall create what we now refer to as miracles. Christ insisted that men would someday duplicate all the miracles that he performed. Every one of us has God within himself, a God that is beating furiously from within in an attempt to emerge. Before we can make miracles, we shall first have to learn to abide by the teachings of the great religious leaders down through time. God is light. This is the fundamental truth. For every speck of material substance in the universe is built up from a particular combination of wavelengths of the creative force, which we call light. God is light. Light is God. I hope to demonstrate this truth by unified field equations derived from a study of the UFO grid, which envelops this planet. I have attempted elsewhere to show some possible relationships between UFO phenomena and certain passages of the Bible. The same kind of links have not been ignored by other UFO researchers. The similarities between certain biblical descriptions and modern reports of UFOs are too marked to be passed over. Again, other writers have shown support for the theory that much in modern religions stems from visits to this planet of superior beings from space in ancient times. Did Christianity, for example, evolve from older religions, which in turn had sprung out of cargo cults? There is a great deal of evidence which would indicate that the hypothesis might be a valid one, without in any way denigrating the basic religious beliefs we cling to. On the contrary, a study of the evidence, far from eroding at basic religious tenets, can hardly fail to buttress them up, to give us confidence in their fundamental truth. Some of that evidence and some of the theories that have been put forward in recent times we shall look at in this chapter. It is almost inevitable that a UFO investigator sooner or later feels compelled to look at the connections between UFO phenomena and religion. One may satisfy oneself that the connections are there, but to try to encourage this idea in others is fraught with hazards. People of many different races, creeds, and cultures have come to an unshakable belief in the existence of some sort of personal savior. There are some 4,000 different religions in the world. The converts to any one of them will go to any lengths to prove that the followers of the other 3,999 are misguided non-believers of the true God and beyond redemption. Schisms in the Christian belief have led to some terribly bloody wars during the last 2,000 years or so, where persuasion and argument have failed to win converts from one belief to another. Force had been employed almost as a matter of course. What a sorry and divided lot we are. Here we are milling around like madmen, searching frantically for something that is right in front of our eyes, always has been and always will be. The simple truth that we are part of the Creator. This is the meaning behind true phrases such as, quote, the equality of all men, end quote. Quote, all men are brothers, end quote, and so on. For as cells among the uncountable billions of cells, we are all aspects of God. God is us. We are light. When we learn how to use the laws of harmony which permeate the whole of creation, we shall be free to create that which is now unattainable. We hold the keys to our own salvation, not some Old Testament figure watching down on us from on high, dealing out punishments and rewards as he sees fit. Conscience, the law of cause and effect, the teachings of superior brothers from space, these are the guides. I believe all this even if you do not, because the evidence I have studied tells me that it is true. Perhaps you condemn me for these beliefs. Perhaps you are calling me blasphemer, or worse. I may never know if all my beliefs are correct or not. Even so, I must be honest with myself, and I must reach my conclusions on the evidence I have before me. One thing I am already sure of. Quote, he, end quote, did not create a universe peopled only with sycophants and flatterers. If he did, he would certainly have become horribly bored with us long ago. When I began writing my first book, I was hesitant about including references to any religion. In fact, I was warned against it. I was assured that readers would be offended, and that the book as a whole would consequently be condemned. I don't deny that the risk of offense is there, although that is certainly not my intention. What I do hope to achieve is the same thing that a friend seeks to do when he calls to a sleeping companion. If I can succeed in jolting some people into a state of wakefulness, even if this means provoking argument and controversy, my intentions will have been successful. A minister and biblical scholar, Barry H. Downing, also has a degree in physics. When I came across his book, The Bible and Flying Saucers, I was understandably surprised. His book, a reverent one for all the eyebrow-raising its title may cause, questions the very foundations of formal religion or formal religious teachings and reinterprets the Bible in the light of modern science. I'm just quickly writing that title down. And see, we've come across other books that these authors say, yeah, you know what, stay away from those. And we are gonna listen here. Because if even these authors are saying, like, don't waste your time on certain books, it's like, alright, I'll listen. There's enough to read. Makes the decision-making process a little easier. Alright, continuing on. It was this book which recently rekindled my interest in tracing links between modern UFO phenomena and sections of the Bible. I thought I had been a little controversial when I introduced some material of this kind. Mr. Downing had been much more outspoken and used a scientific argument to suggest that most of the miraculous happenings related in the Bible were connected with visits to this planet of space people, a superior race sent here to attempt to teach the peoples of Earth how to live their lives in harmony with the universe instead of existing in conditions that led to chaos and destruction. I'm going to pause here real quickly. Yeah, I hope all of you have had a good past several weeks here. I needed to do a little reset of myself here. So I apologize for not being here if you were looking forward to seeing me. I do believe most of this year I've been consistent with being here. You know, I did like a 4-month stint where I would miss a show here and there, but like 1 out of like 3 or 4 shows for the week. And now that I'm back down to 3 shows a week for now, it's a little more manageable. Alright, let's carry on, shall we? We're on page 226. Got about 5 pages left. Alright. If some of the points I had put forward were ripples in the wind of change, Mr. Downing had produced a veritable tornado. In his book, he discusses most of the classical miracles of the Bible, which other UFO investigators have considered to be related to the intervention of outer space beings. Some of these events include the Ascension, Jacob's Ladder, Elijah being taken up to heaven on a whirlwind, and the experiences of Ezekiel. The Bible passage which describes the burnished wheels which Ezekiel saw in a vision is perhaps the most interesting. The account tallies with many modern-day descriptions of UFOs, complete with passengers. However, I must leave you to study these matters for yourself. A number of books have been published dealing with such correspondences. Mr. Downing particularly interested me with his explanations of the Exodus. Some months ago, it was suggested that I check all the geographic locations of religious significance where miraculous happenings and other events had occurred, from biblical to recent times, to ascertain whether the actual location had any direct relationship with the occurrence in terms of harmonics. I did accordingly carry out an approximate check on several places, including Lourdes and Fatima. I found, for example, that all the math incorporated into the geographical position of Bethlehem invariably worked back to unity. Other findings convinced me that geographical positions did have a relationship to particular events and manifestations. We agreed that the whole subject might best be taken up in another work at a later date, once we have established the existence of the geometric harmonics which connect the physical world, as we know it, to the less tangible worlds reached by harmonic manipulations of light and gravity frequencies. In any case, my interest was sufficiently aroused after reading Mr. Downing's interpretation of the Exodus that I determined to locate the geometric position of the Red or Reed Sea, where it was closed following the passage of Israelites in their flight from Egypt. Was it possible that evidence could be found to show that the waters of the sea were parted by an anti-gravity force field, thus allowing the Israelites to cross over on dry ground? Let's quote a passage from Downing's book. Oh, this passage goes on for quite a while here. Yeah, thank you, Andres. I appreciate it. Alright, excerpt from Downing's book. The Bible narrates that, quote, when the Pharaoh let the people go, God led the people around by way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea, end quote. And that's from Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 and 18. What is meant by saying that God led the Israelites? Here's the answer. The quote, Lord, end quote, went before them, the Israelites, by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. And this is from Exodus chapter 13, verses 21 and 22. By means of an unidentified flying object, God led the Israelites from Egypt to the Red Sea. How does this biblical UFO compare with modern UFOs? Modern UFOs sometimes exhibit a corona effect, which results in a white, cloud-like halo appearance. Modern UFOs usually glow in the dark, as the biblical, quote, pillar of fire, end quote, seems to have done. But the difficult question is the significance of the Hebrew term for pillar. There are, in fact, two Hebrew words which have been translated as pillar in the RSV, amud and mazaba. So I'll spell these two words. The first word, A-M-M-U-D, and the second word, M-A-Z-Z-E-B-A-H. In this passage, the word amud is used, which may mean a cylindrical column. Thus, the implication would seem to be that this UFO looked like a cylindrical column, height not specified, cloud-like during the day, but showing in the dark. If the Bible is describing a UFO which appears as a cloud-like cylindrical column during the day and as a glowing cylindrical column at night, then this UFO corresponds in description with a class of modern UFOs which have been seen with considerable frequency. Occasionally, these cylindrical or pillar UFOs seem to act as a kind of, quote, mothership, end quote, for the flying saucer type or class of UFO, which seem smaller in dimension than the pillars from which they come. This UFO deliberately led the Israelites to the Red Sea, which seemed like a foolish thing to have done, because with the Egyptian army coming up from behind, the Hebrews were literally caught between the Pharaoh and the deep blue sea. The Bible says Pharaoh thought the Israelites were, quote, entangled in the land, The wilderness has shut them in, end quote. And that's from Exodus chapter 14, verse 3. Pharaoh and his army moved in for the kill, with the pillar having proved a poor guide, unless the being in charge of the UFO knew ahead of time what would happen at the Red Sea. The text suggests that some sort of UFO, totally under its own control, led the Israelites out of Egypt to the Red Sea, and then as Pharaoh's army closed in, the UFO moved from the front to the rear of the army of Israel and kept the two military camps separated during the night. Phase 1 of the operation involved leading Israel to the sea. Phase 2 requires the UFO to keep the camps separated until darkness falls. Now begins Phase 3. Quote, Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. End quote. And that's from Exodus chapter 14, verse 21. So this author is saying here that when they refer to the Lord in this passage of the Bible, that actually could be referring to the UFO guiding them. I could see how that could be. Alright, so that's it from that excerpt. I went over these extracts from Downing's book with a recently acquired map from the National Geographic magazine, illustrating, quote, the lands of the Bible today, end quote. And in parentheses it says see map 12. That's on the next page here. We'll look at that. Shown on the map is the traditional route of the Israelites in their flight before the Egyptians. The first point that strikes one is the unusual course followed by the Israelites, considering that Pharaoh's army was in close pursuit. First, they headed south-southeast from Ramses to Succoth. Then, for some unaccountable reason, they turned back and headed north to the crossing point at the Red or Reed Sea. It seems odd that the, quote, Lord, end quote, should lead the Israelites into a possible trap of this nature when a free route could have been taken to the southeast over land which would eventually have led down the eastern side of the Gulf of Suez. This route would have also been much shorter, unless, of course, as Mr. Downing comments, the, quote, beings in charge of the UFOs knew ahead of time what would happen at the Reed Sea, end quote. I too believe this to be the case. If the, quote, pillar of cloud, end quote, was in fact a cigar-shaped UFO, then the intelligence controlling it had to lead the Israelites to the one place in the area where an unforgettable miracle could be staged, and Pharaoh's army destroyed. A geographic position had to be selected where all the necessary harmonic coordinates A geographic position had to be selected were all the necessary harmonic coordinates to set up a force field with which the seeming miracle could be arranged were available. And since we in the 20th century are still unable to duplicate such a feat, a miracle it was indeed. According to Downing, at the time of the, quote, parting of the waters, end quote, the UFO had taken up a position behind the Israelites, who were then on the west bank of the Reed Sea. From this fact, we can assume that the cigar-shaped vehicle was positioned a half mile or so from the western shoreline. So this map 12 here says, at the time of the Exodus, the Reed Sea located here was considered part of the Red Sea. It is thought to be the marshy ground where the Egyptian chariots became mired. From Exodus chapter 14, verses 26 through 28. So we just have this little map here. Yeah, that route looks a little suspicious to me. Like, why would it go up and down like that? That's what I'm thinking about right now. I checked the map coordinates for this area and found that the latitude of the crossing from west to east was close to 31 degrees north. This was an interesting beginning because this angle of latitude is equal to 1,860 minutes of arc. The log of 1,860 is 2,695, which is a harmonic value derived from the unified equation. In my initial publications, I used this latitude, but with more evidence available at this time, I am more inclined to think a latitude of 30 degrees, 59 feet, 0.426 inches would be more appropriate. The displacement from the North Pole would then be 59.0165 degrees. The harmonic reciprocal of this value is 169,444. Research up to the present time has proved that harmonic is associated with mass and gravity. The longitude value is estimated to be 32 degrees, 11 feet, 45.1165 inches, which is within seconds of the original calculation. This is equal to 32.195866 degrees. If this harmonic is increased by the multiplication of 6 as follows, 32.195866 times 6 times 6 times 6 equals 6,954,307 harmonic, then the speed of light reciprocal is evident. I now believe that from this position a wedge-shaped force field was created and focused across the stretch of water to the east of the Israelites. In order for the waters to be parted, it must have been necessary to produce such a force field lying along the line of latitude, thus forcing the waters apart and forming a ribbon of dry land by means of which the Israelites could cross over to the eastern shore. The intensity of the field could have been varied to any desired value, and frequencies necessary to react with the water would first of all have been used to cause the sea to part and allow the Israelites to cross. Once safely on the eastern shore, the field could have been intensified so that when the Egyptians tried to follow, they and their vehicles would have been weighed down by the gravitational forces directed upon them, stranding them midway across the ribbon of exposed seabed. At the appropriate moment, the force field would have been withdrawn, the water would have flooded back, drowning the army of Pharaoh and destroying its equipment. The east wind felt by the Israelites to be blowing in their faces all that long night can be explained by the positioning of the UFO behind them. The force field setup would cause atmospheric effects which would certainly have displaced masses of air. The UFO would have been the focal point for the movement of the air masses. In theory, a wind from both east and from the west would converge on the central point of the wedge-shaped force field. If Israelites only the Israelites would only have been conscious of the wind from the east blowing in their faces, as the UFO was to their rear, that is, to their west. If records were available, we might find that Pharaoh's army experienced strong winds blowing up from behind them. Did an inscrutable but almighty God cause the reed sea to part, or did some highly advanced beings perform a scientific miracle for us, knowing that someday we would be able to go to the records and understand for ourselves how it had been done? The miracle was a masterly production. Intentionally, perhaps. It was one that could never be forgotten by the human race. Would a just God have destroyed an entire army in such a horrifying way? I think not. But a superior race may have done so, if the action suited their purpose, whatever that may have been. And finally, we have a diagram here. It says Exodus, the making of a miracle. Shows the longitude, west wind, east wind, Pharaoh's army, Israelites. Yeah, this is it for today. But I will be showing this diagram real quickly. Okay. And that concludes chapter 25. So, next week, we read about Ed Leedskalnin in this book. Finally. So I'll have my new paper marker. I'll get these other ones out of here. Gonna combine these now. Combine and condense. We're almost done. Look at that. I enjoy doing this series. It's a lot of information here. You know, I hope I don't lose too many of you when I start getting into the number aspects of all this, but it's important to do so. We need to know what we're dealing with. This topic is very deep, so I want to cover as many details as possible with it. But anyways, that'll do it for today. I really thank all of you for being here. These next few parts of this series will probably be under an hour each, like today's, because the chapters really aren't that long, but I want to keep next week's show specifically to chapter 26. So that might actually make it a really short chapter. A really short show, actually. Yeah, we'll see what happens, but I'm planning on breaking that up into just chapter 26 next week. Then 27 and 28 we could probably put together. And then after that we just have chapter 29. So 4 chapters left in this book. And like I said before, I'm gathering more notes behind the scenes here. I'm reorganizing notes. I'm gathering different types of content from Bruce Cathie. He did do some video sit-down interviews. It's really hard to find this stuff. That's in the most simplest way I could say. You have to really seek this information out. But that'll do it for today, everyone. We'll be back next week. So next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central. We'll be live again here. Please remember to like the video. It helps the algorithms. Also, I'm on different video platforms, and everything is accessible from my website, yisselmisselproductions.com. You can simply go to yisselmissile.com. It'll take you to the same website. But there you could find everything sorted into playlists. Everything from YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. All of that's on my main website now. So, it's featured. It's right on the homepage, and you can start clicking around on buttons and find which videos you'd like to watch. So that's it. Just wanted to get that out of the way too. So, until the next one, class dismissed.